Today we will be revising our chapter of Theory of Consumer Behavior because we have finished it in the last class. Just to have a recap of things, those who have missed any topic will be revising the entire content of this chapter one by one. So first of all, I would like from your side, if anybody wants to answer me as to what utility is. From your side, anybody?
Yes, sir.
What utility is? Yes, you may answer.
Yes, sir. This is a psychological need of satisfaction.
It's a psychological.
Need of satisfaction.
Understood. When you say utility, utility means an expectation of satisfaction from a particular product or service. Right? When you expect something to satisfy you, say for example, if I am hungry, which I am really, then I will find utility in the lunch which I have with me. Yes or no? Once my hunger is gone, even if there is a food for me, I would not be able to find, I would not be expecting satisfaction from that food because I have already been satisfied. So utility basically is an expectation of satisfaction. Right? It's a mindset, it's a feeling that you are expecting something to satisfy you. This is called utility. And the analysis of utility is very important if you want to understand the behavior of a consumer. Because every consumer, being a rational consumer, will prefer to consume only those goods or services which have got some utility. We will not be consuming those goods and services which have no utility. We will not be consuming those goods and services which will have no utility. Now, if you want to understand the theory or the behavior of a consumer or analyze how a consumer behaves, you will have to look into the different concepts of utilities. And over the years, different economists have given different concepts to utility. The entire concepts given to utility have been broadly classified into two. One is the cardinal approach and the other one is the ordinal approach. Cardinal approach is a traditional approach of utility analysis given by Professor Alfred Marshall. And the term cardinal itself means measurable. The word cardinal means measurable. Something which can be measured in terms of. So what Marshall and his followers said that utility is a concept which can be measured in terms of money, and the unit for measuring utility in terms of money is called units. Right. To make things simple, Marshall developed two different types of utilities. One was total utility, very good, and the other one was marginal utility. So how would you define total utility? Total utility is the aggregate of, is the summation of the utility which you expect to get from consuming a given set of products. How would you calculate total utility? TU is equal to summation of marginal utility, or sometimes when you multiply average utility by the unit consumed, you may also come to get total utility. Now talking about the nature of TU curve. The TU curve starts from the point of origin and it is rising at a diminishing rate as more and more units are being consumed. And once it reaches its maximum, that is the point of maximum satisfaction. And even if the consumer continues with the consumption, the total utility no longer increases, rather it starts to fall. Right? Now, what is marginal utility? Marginal utility is defined as change in total utility due to 1 unit change in consumption.
1 more unit is consumed.
Right? If you are consuming 1 additional unit of a product, by how much the existing utility has changed? This is known as marginal utility. Marginal utility is also defined as the rate of change in TU. By what rate TU has changed? Isn't it?
Yes, sir.
The formula for calculating marginal utility is very simple. It says it's delta TU by delta Q. Delta TU means change in total utility and delta Q is change in units consumed. Isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Students, are you understanding? Do I need to be in Hindi?
No, sir, we understand.
You are understanding?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Now, when you talk about the nature of the MU curve, the MU curve is starting from its maximum. The first unit that you are consuming will have the maximum value of MU. Now, as you go on increasing the consumption, the marginal utility will start diminishing, falling. If you have the curve with you, you can see that marginal utility curve never rises. It always falls. It is always falling. It is always falling. And by falling, what I mean to say is that it goes on to touch the x-axis where the value of MU becomes 0. Not only this, if the consumer continues with consumption, the marginal utility curve does not stop there. It goes or it continues its fall and goes below the x-axis to give negative values to MU. Isn't it?
Yes.
So what I'm trying to make you understand is that the marginal utility starts from its maximum, and with every successive unit consumed, it starts. Yes or no, class?
Yes, sir.
Now coming on to the relationship between TU and MU. Relationship between TU and MU. When marginal utility is falling, but while falling it remains above the x-axis, what I'm saying? When MU is falling, but while falling, when it is above the x-axis, it shows that TU is rising but at a diminishing rate. TU is rising but at a diminishing rate. Now the second point. The point where MU touches the x-axis, the point where MU touches the x-axis means that MU becomes 0. The value of MU is 0. When that point on MU curve corresponds to any point, you have that point in TU where TU is at its maximum. Right? So in simple words, we can say that when MU is 0,
TU is higher.
TU is at its maximum. Not higher, TU is at its maximum. Now what next? When MU curve goes below the x-axis to give negative values to MU, the TU starts to fall from its maximum. Right? This is what the relationship is. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. Now what next? The next is law of diminishing marginal utility. What this law states? This law states that assuming everything to remain constant at a given time and place, as a consumer goes on consuming 1 additional unit of a product, the utility derived from each such unit consumed goes on diminishing. goes on diminishing. Right? So this is what law of diminishing marginal utility is. What I said? Assuming all other things to remain constant at a given time and place, the law of DMU states that as a consumer goes on consuming one additional unit of a product, the utility derived from each such unit consumed goes on diminishing, goes on falling. Diminish means reducing, diminish means falling. Come on. Right? But I also made it very clear, and I was very particular on this point, that if you want to hold good the law of diminishing marginal utility, you must assume certain things. There are 4 very relevant and important assumptions. What are those? Number 1, consumer has to be normal. This law is not going to apply on abnormal consumers. You cannot expect this law to be applicable on abnormal consumers. Point number 2 says, homogeneous product. It means that there should not be any product differentiation. Once you have started consuming a particular product, you should keep on consuming that particular product itself. There should not be any difference between the first unit consumed and the second unit consumed or the third unit consumed. Product should be same. Only then this law is going to apply. Point number 3 says that there should not be a time gap between 2 successive units consumed. If a consumer wants to apply this law, that is law of DMU, what he should do is non-stop consumption has to be performed. Consumption without a break, consumption without a stop, consumption without a gap. That has to be on regular basis, continuous basis. Say for example, if I am taking a class at present, sitting in this room, and I want to have a cup of or a glass of water. I have drunk a glass of water. Now, after taking the class, I go outside and stand for 15 minutes in the sun, and then come back, and the glass of water which I will have perhaps will give me more satisfaction than the glass of water which I had in this classroom. Isn't it? Why? Because perhaps there is time gap. There is a time gap. And the law says that this law will apply only when there is continuous consumption. As I mentioned, if I have a glass of water after standing 15 minutes or 20 minutes in the sun, I will be getting more satisfaction than what I got when I took a glass of water when I was teaching class, isn't it? So, does the law of DMU apply in this situation? No. Because law of DMU says that the utility derived from the last unit consumed should be lowest. Should be lowest. In this example, you are observing that the utility derived from the last unit consumed is more than what it was in the previous unit. This is against the law of DMU. It is because there is a time gap. If you want to apply this law, you must make sure that there is no such time gap. Right? Now, point number 4 says the standard unit of consumption. Do you remember the example which I gave in class? Do you remember the example which I gave in class? Of standard unit of consumption? Which example did I give?
So you took the example from Srishti and Nana and his second extent in Hindi.
No, you can't be in English. Why?
And so Nana is very thirsty. Sorry, Srishti is very thirsty. And Srishti said to Nana, please give me 1 glass of water. Srishti came outside and he took water with it and gave a drop of water. Then the need of water to Srishti is missing.
Really? You are good at English. You can talk in English. Right. Yes.
Yes.
Why are you sitting in the back? You had a quarrel with him or what? Okay?
Yes, sir.
You have a quarrel with him?
No, sir.
Yes.
No, sir.
Yes, yes. I can make out. Why you had a quarrel with him?
No, sir.
झूठ बोल रहा है। You should not quarrel. Make a handshake. Make a handshake. Say sorry to each other.
Sorry.
You have not said sorry. Sorry. Say. The thing is कि we might have different opinion about somebody.
Yes, sir.
We might have different opinion, but it does not mean difference of opinion does not mean that we should quarrel. We might agree or we might disagree to what you say or what he says, but this does not mean that we should quarrel. Right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So. I was talking about
Standard unit of consumption.
standard unit of consumption. If you consume from dropper or from a spoon, yes or no? Or a bigger unit of consumption, what you will find? You will find that the law does not apply. This law will not apply. So the unit with which you are consuming should be a standard unit of consumption. Isn't it? So these are four important assumptions if you want to make sure that the law of DMU is applicable. Did I make you understand about consumer surplus in the class?
Yes, sir.
Now what is consumer surplus? I said that consumer surplus is the difference between value in use and value in exchange.
It generates same amount of satisfaction.
It is the difference between value in use and value in exchange. Now what is value in use? Value in use means the
Actual price.
the utility that you are expecting from a product to get. Say for example, if for this pen I am ready to pay rupees 40, so it means that I am expecting this pen to give me satisfaction up to value of rupees 40. Yes or no?
Yes.
So this is value in use. What I am ready to pay? 40. And once I go to the market and I make a survey, I found that this pen was available only at rupees 32 in the market, for which I was ready to pay rupees 40. So 32 is what I have actually paid. This is value in exchange. Right? So did I save something for me? Did I save something for me?
Yes, sir.
How much did I save? I saved rupees 8. 40 minus 32 is 8. That is why I said you are not here. So I was ready to pay rupees 40. I have actually paid only rupees 32. I have saved something for me, that is rupees 8. This is what is known as consumer surplus. Right?
Value in use and value in exchange.
Yes. The difference between value in use and value in exchange. Now moving on to the ordinal approach of utility analysis. What is the ordinal approach? This approach of utility analysis was given by Professor Hicks and Allen. Hicks and his followers were of the opinion that utility is something which cannot be measured in terms of money. You cannot measure utility in terms of money. You can never ever measure it. He cited few examples which I quoted in the class. And by citing those examples, he asked, how can one measure utility in terms of money? Utility is not measurable. You cannot measure it. Right? And therefore, what he said and his followers said that utility can be judged only on the basis of the rank which we as a rational consumer provided.
Yes.
We as consumers are rational. We have the ability to identify as to which of the utility is more important and which one is less important. And based on this, we can rank it. Based on this, we can make an order, we can make a sequence. Right? And that sequence, that order, that sequence or that order is referred to as ordinal approach. The most important wants will be ranked at the top, and as you move ahead, the orders will come down. Right? The ordinal approach of utility analysis is also known as indifference curve approach. Also known as what? Indifference curve approach. Indifference curve approach. Now, what is this indifference curve approach? It uses two different curves. One is the indifference curve and the other one is budget line. A consumer is said to be in a state of equilibrium at a point where consumer optimizes the level of satisfaction with the available resources. Right?
Yes.
What is an indifference curve? An indifference curve is a curve which shows different quantities of two products at each given point, but all those different quantities offer same level of satisfaction. Very good. What are the features of an indifference curve? We have written 5 important features of indifference curve. Number 1, an indifference curve is convex. Why is it convex? Due to diminishing marginal rate of substitution. Point number 2 was an indifference curve is sloping downwards from left to right. Why an indifference curve is sloping downwards from left to right? Because there is an inverse relationship between variables on y-axis and x-axis. That is, if you want to increase the consumption of goods X, you will have to reduce the consumption of goods Y. Because consumers have got limited resource. Because consumers have got limited resource. Point number 3 says an indifference curve will never touch either of the axis. It will not touch either y-axis or x-axis. Why? Because indifference curve is based on the assumption that at a particular point of time, every consumer must be consuming 2 products. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Point number 4 says interest, not intersect. Intersect. And point number 5 is higher indifference curve shows higher level of satisfaction. So we have an indifference map for this. So what is an indifference map? An indifference map is a set of indifference curves or a collection of indifference curves. Is it clear, class?
Yes, sir.
So the chief is done for today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.